911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional, a stark contrast to the frantic sobs that followed. My daughter's gone! I can't find her! Amy Martin's voice cracked with terror, each word a desperate plea. She was just in the backyard, playing. I only went inside for a minute to answer the phone. The line was filled with ragged breaths and choked sobs. Please, you have to help me. She's only 6 years old. The chilling 911 call marked the beginning of a nightmare, a dark cloud descending upon a seemingly ordinary life. Tulsa, Oklahoma, in 2005, was a city basking in the glow of suburban tranquility. Manicured lawns, quiet streets, and friendly neighbors painted a picture of idyllic normalcy. Little did the residents know, a sinister secret was about to shatter their peace. The Martin family, Amy, David, and their bright-eyed 6-year-old daughter Olivia, were the epitome of an average, loving family. Their lives revolved around school, playdates, and the simple joys of everyday life. They lived in a modest house on a quiet street, their backyard a haven for Olivia's imaginative games. That Tuesday started like any other. The sun was shining, birds were singing, and Olivia was happily playing in her backyard, her laughter echoing through the air. It was around 5 p.m. when Amy, while watching Olivia play, briefly stepped inside to answer a ringing phone. The call was short, unimportant, a mere interruption in the tapestry of their day. But those few minutes would forever alter the course of their lives. When Amy returned to the backyard, Olivia was gone. Her toys lay scattered on the grass, a silent testament to the abruptly halted playtime. The gate to the backyard was closed, and the fence showed no signs of forced entry. A wave of icy dread washed over Amy as she frantically searched the yard, calling Olivia's name, her voice growing increasingly desperate. The initial response was immediate and overwhelming. Local police were on the scene within minutes, sirens piercing the once peaceful neighborhood. Neighbors poured out of their homes, their faces etched with concern, joining in the frantic search. Flyers with Olivia's picture were hastily printed and distributed, adorning lampposts and store windows throughout Tulsa. The news spread like wildfire, igniting a community's collective fear and determination. Within 24 hours, the FBI joined the investigation, bringing additional resources and expertise to the desperate search for the missing girl. Early suspicions cast a wide net. Detectives meticulously checked the Martin family's background, searching for any hidden secrets or potential enemies. Neighbors were interviewed, their accounts scrutinized for any inconsistencies or clues. Registered sex offenders in the area were investigated, their alibis carefully examined. But the initial inquiries yielded no immediate leads, no tangible evidence to point the investigators in the right direction. The mystery surrounding Olivia's disappearance deepened, fueling the growing sense of unease. Olivia's disappearance quickly transcended local news, becoming a national headline. News channels broadcast constant updates, showcasing Olivia's smiling face and pleading for information. Public appeals were made, celebrities lent their voices, and the nation held its breath, hoping for a miracle. The constant media attention, while intended to aid in the search, placed an unbearable strain on the Martin family. Every news report, every interview, was a painful reminder of their missing daughter, a constant reopening of their raw wounds. The public sympathy was a double-edged sword, offering support, while simultaneously amplifying their grief. If you're interested in learning what happens next in this heartbreaking case, be sure to subscribe to our channel for updates and other true crime stories. We'll continue to follow this story and bring you the latest information as it unfolds. But as the weeks turned into months, the investigation stalled, grinding to a frustrating halt. The initial flurry of activity subsided, replaced by a chilling silence. No significant leads emerged, no credible witnesses came forward, and the hope of finding Olivia alive began to dwindle with each passing day. The case, once a national obsession, slowly faded from the headlines, relegated to the dusty files of unsolved mysteries. The weight of unanswered questions pressed down on the community, a constant reminder of the little girl who vanished without a trace. Leading the investigation was Detective John Riley, a seasoned veteran of the Tulsa Police Department. Riley was a man hardened by years on the force, his face etched with the lines of countless unsolved cases. He was known for his dedication, his relentless pursuit of justice, and his unwavering commitment to finding answers for the families of victims. But Olivia's disappearance haunted him in a way that few other cases had. He saw the innocence in her smiling face, the pain in her parents' eyes, and he vowed to do everything in his power to bring her home. The challenges of the investigation were immense. There was no physical evidence, no witnesses to the abduction, and no clear motive. The backyard showed no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Olivia may have left willingly, or that the perpetrator was someone she knew and trusted. The lack of concrete leads left investigators grasping at straws, chasing down dead ends, and struggling to make sense of the seemingly inexplicable. As time went on, the case grew colder, the trails grew fainter, and the likelihood of finding Olivia diminished with each passing day. Yet Detective Riley refused to give up, tirelessly reviewing the file, re-interviewing witnesses, and clinging to the hope that one day he would find the missing piece of the puzzle. The psychological toll on Amy and David Martin was immeasurable. The disappearance of their daughter shattered their world, leaving them adrift in a sea of grief and despair. Their once happy home became a constant reminder of their loss, each room echoing with the absence of Olivia's laughter. Their marriage, once a source of strength and support, began to strain under the immense pressure. They attended support groups for parents of missing children, seeking solace and understanding from others who shared their pain. But even in those gatherings, they felt isolated, haunted by the uncertainty of Olivia's fate. The investigation was plagued by false leads and dead ends, each one raising false hopes only to be cruelly dashed. A psychic with visions of Olivia being held captive in a nearby town led police on a fruitless search, only to find nothing. A possible sighting of Olivia in another state prompted a cross-country trip, but the girl turned out to be someone else. These misleading tips and unsubstantiated rumors only served to deepen the family's despair, prolonging their agony and hindering the investigation. As time passed, the community's involvement began to wane. The initial outpouring of support gradually faded, replaced by a sense of resignation and acceptance. The Martin family felt increasingly isolated and forgotten, as if the world had moved on while they remained trapped in their nightmare. The constant media attention subsided, the flyers faded from the lampposts, and Olivia's case became just another cold case statistic. Despite the setbacks and the dwindling hope, Detective Riley remained steadfast in his commitment to finding Olivia. He periodically revisited the evidence, poring over the crime scene photos, reviewing the interview transcripts, and searching for any overlooked detail. He interviewed people associated with the family, hoping to uncover a hidden connection or a forgotten clue. He knew that the odds were stacked against him, but he refused to let Olivia's case become another unsolved mystery. He carried the weight of her disappearance on his shoulders, driven by a deep sense of responsibility and a burning desire to bring closure to the Martin family. He couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, buried beneath the layers of unanswered questions, lay the truth about what happened to Olivia Martin. Years blurred into a decade, then nearly 2023 arrived, marking 18 years since Olivia vanished. The vibrant, hopeful faces on the old flyers had faded, mirroring the dwindling hope within the Tulsa community. Olivia Martin's disappearance lingered as a cold case, a chilling reminder of an unsolved mystery, a wound that refused to heal. New families moved into the neighborhood, unaware of the tragedy that had unfolded in their quiet, seemingly safe streets. Children played in the same parks, oblivious to the shadow of Olivia's absence. Life went on, but for Amy and David Martin, time stood still, frozen in the agonizing moment their daughter disappeared. The house where Olivia grew up remained, a silent monument to a life interrupted. Detective John Riley, his hair now silvered and his steps slower, was nearing retirement. He had dedicated his life to law enforcement, solving countless crimes, and bringing justice to victims and their families. But Olivia's case continued to gnaw at him, a constant reminder of his limitations. He felt a personal responsibility, a deep-seated need to provide Amy and David with answers, to finally bring Olivia home. Retirement loomed, but Riley couldn't leave without making one last, desperate attempt to crack the case. He visited Amy Martin, her face etched with years of sorrow, her eyes still holding a flicker of hope. He made her a promise: he would reopen the investigation, he would exhaust every possible avenue, and he would not rest until he found the truth about Olivia. The world of forensic science had undergone a revolution since 2005. DNA technology had advanced exponentially, allowing investigators to analyze minute traces of evidence that were previously undetectable. New forensic techniques had emerged, offering the potential to glean crucial information from old crime scenes. Riley knew that these advancements represented a new opportunity, a chance to revisit the evidence with fresh eyes and cutting-edge tools. He secured the necessary approvals and resources, determined to leverage the latest technology to solve a case that had haunted him for nearly 2 decades. He understood that time was running out, both for him and for the possibility of finding answers. Riley ordered a comprehensive re-examination of all the original evidence collected in 2005. Every item, from Olivia's clothing to her toys, was meticulously catalogued and sent to the state-of-the-art forensic lab. He instructed the lab technicians to focus on items that might have been overlooked or inaccessible with the older technology. He prioritized the analysis of any potential DNA samples, hoping to find a previously unidentified profile. He knew that the smallest clue could be the key to unlocking the mystery, the missing piece that would finally bring Olivia home. The process was painstaking, requiring meticulous attention to detail and unwavering patience. The renewed scrutiny extended to the Martin family's backyard, the last place Olivia was seen. Soil samples were collected from various locations, analyzed for any trace evidence of foreign materials or disturbances. The fence line was carefully examined for any signs of forced entry or the presence of fibers or hairs. The investigators meticulously documented every detail, knowing that even the seemingly insignificant could hold the key to solving the puzzle. The backyard, once a symbol of innocence and joy, now became the focal point of a renewed quest for truth. After weeks of meticulous analysis, a small breakthrough emerged. A seemingly insignificant piece of fabric, discovered clinging to a thorn bush near the fence line, yielded a faint trace of DNA. The sample was sent for advanced DNA analysis, a process that could amplify even the smallest amount of genetic material. Riley held his breath, knowing that this could be the break he had been waiting for, the glimmer of hope that could finally lead to answers. The waiting was agonizing, each day stretching into an eternity. But Riley remained focused, driven by his promise to Amy Martin and his unwavering determination to bring Olivia home. He knew that after 18 years, the truth was finally within reach. The DNA analysis report arrived, a document that held the potential to shatter years of silence. The results revealed a partial match to an individual whose profile wasn't in the National DNA Database, someone who had never been considered a suspect. The partial match indicated a familial connection, a relative of the person whose DNA was found on the fabric. Detective Riley felt a surge of adrenaline, a sense that he was finally on the verge of a breakthrough. He immediately ordered a deeper investigation, instructing his team to trace the familial link and identify the individual who matched the DNA profile. The search led them to a name: Robert Smith. Robert Smith was a former neighbor of the Martins, living just a few houses down in 2005. He was a quiet, unassuming man who kept to himself, rarely interacting with the other residents on the street. Shortly after Olivia's disappearance, Smith had abruptly moved away, relocating to a different state and leaving no forwarding address. His departure had seemed unremarkable at the time, dismissed as a coincidence, but in light of the DNA evidence, it now took on a sinister significance. Smith's name had never surfaced during the initial investigation. He hadn't been on the radar of potential suspects. He was a ghost, a forgotten face from a past tragedy. A brief overview of Smith's background revealed a seemingly ordinary life. He had held a series of unremarkable jobs, working as a clerk in a department store, a delivery driver, and most recently, a warehouse worker. He had no prior criminal record, no history of violence, and no known connection to the Martin family beyond being a neighbor. He was, on the surface, an unlikely suspect, a man who appeared to be living a normal, uneventful life. But Detective Riley knew that appearances could be deceiving, that even the most ordinary individuals could harbor dark secrets. He was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how unsettling it might be. Riley's team initiated a discreet surveillance operation, tracking Smith's movements and gathering information about his current life. They learned that he lived alone in a small apartment, worked diligently at his job, and spent most of his free time watching television or reading books. He had no close friends or romantic partners, his life seemingly devoid of any significant connections. The detectives observed his daily routines, documenting his habits and searching for any signs of suspicious behavior. They needed to obtain a DNA sample to confirm the match, but they had to do it without alerting Smith to their presence. They knew that if he suspected he was being watched, he might flee or destroy any potential evidence. After several days of careful observation, the detectives devised a plan to obtain a DNA sample. While Smith was at work, they discreetly collected a discarded coffee cup from his trash can, carefully preserving it to avoid contamination. The cup was sent to the lab for DNA analysis, and the detectives waited anxiously for the results. The confirmation came swiftly and unequivocally. The DNA sample obtained from the coffee cup matched the partial profile from the fabric found in the Martins' backyard. It was a full match, a definitive link between Robert Smith and the scene of Olivia's disappearance. The years of searching, the false leads, the dwindling hope, all culminated in this moment of undeniable truth. Armed with the DNA evidence, Detective Riley obtained an arrest warrant for Robert Smith. He coordinated with local law enforcement in Smith's new hometown, and a team of officers was dispatched to his apartment. Smith was arrested without incident, taken into custody and informed of the charges against him. The arrest sent shockwaves through Smith's new community, his neighbors and colleagues expressing disbelief and confusion. They remembered him as a quiet, unremarkable man, incapable of such a heinous crime. But the DNA evidence spoke volumes, painting a portrait of a man hiding a dark secret, a predator who had eluded justice for 18 long years. The arrest marked a turning point in the case, a moment of closure for the Martin family and a step towards holding Olivia's abductor accountable for his actions. The community of Tulsa, Oklahoma, reacted to Robert Smith's arrest with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a chilling sense of violation. Many residents remembered Smith as the quiet, almost invisible neighbor who had lived just a few houses down from the Martins. He was the kind of person who blended into the background, never drawing attention to himself, never causing trouble. People recalled seeing him tending to his lawn, walking his dog, or simply sitting on his porch, observing the neighborhood with an unreadable expression. Now, the revelation that this seemingly unremarkable man was a prime suspect in Olivia Martin's disappearance sent a wave of fear and unease through the community. It shattered their sense of security, reminding them that evil could lurk in the most unexpected places, hidden behind the facade of normalcy. For Amy and David Martin, Smith's arrest brought a complex mix of emotions. Relief washed over them, the knowledge that a suspect had finally been apprehended after 18 years of agonizing uncertainty. It was a validation of their unwavering hope, a sign that their prayers had finally been answered. But their relief was tempered by a renewed wave of grief, the pain of Olivia's loss resurfacing with a vengeance. The prospect of a trial loomed before them, a daunting ordeal that would force them to relive the trauma of Olivia's disappearance in excruciating detail. They knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but they were determined to seek justice for their daughter, to ensure that her abductor was held accountable for his heinous crime. The arrest was just the beginning of a new chapter in their long and painful journey. Robert Smith initially denied any involvement in Olivia's disappearance. During his interrogation, he claimed he barely knew the Martin family, that he had only exchanged a few casual greetings with them over the years. He insisted that he had no reason to harm Olivia, that he was a peaceful and law-abiding citizen. He offered no explanation for the presence of his DNA on the fabric found in the Martins' backyard, suggesting that it might have been the result of accidental contamination or a misunderstanding. He portrayed himself as a victim of circumstance, a man wrongly accused of a crime he did not commit. But the detectives were not convinced. They had the DNA evidence, a powerful piece of forensic proof that contradicted Smith's claims of innocence. As the investigation progressed, other pieces of circumstantial evidence began to surface, slowly but surely linking Smith to the crime. Old photos were unearthed, showing Smith in the background of neighborhood gatherings, his presence seemingly innocuous at the time, but now taking on a sinister meaning. Witnesses came forward, recalling fleeting encounters with Smith that had seemed unremarkable then, but now resonated with a chilling significance. A former neighbor remembered seeing Smith watching Olivia play in her backyard on several occasions, his gaze lingering a little too long. Another recalled Smith asking about the Martin family's schedule, inquiring about when they would be home and when Olivia would be alone. These seemingly insignificant details, pieced together over time, painted a disturbing picture of a man who had been carefully observing Olivia, perhaps even planning her abduction. The media coverage of Smith's arrest emphasized his ordinariness, highlighting the fact that he was a seemingly average man who had managed to conceal a dark secret for nearly 2 decades. News reports featured interviews with his neighbors and colleagues, all of whom expressed shock and disbelief at the allegations against him. The media emphasized the fact that Smith could have been anyone's neighbor, anyone's coworker, anyone's friend. This unsettling portrayal of Smith as an ordinary monster made the case even more terrifying, reinforcing the idea that evil could exist anywhere, hidden beneath the surface of everyday life. The media coverage amplified the community's fear and unease, turning Robert Smith into a symbol of the hidden dangers that lurk in the shadows. The story served as a chilling reminder that even in the most peaceful and idyllic communities, darkness can find a way to take root. The interrogation room was sterile, the air thick with tension. Robert Smith sat hunched over, his eyes darting nervously around the room. Detectives Riley and Miller sat opposite him, their expressions unwavering, their gazes fixed on Smith's every move. The room was sparsely furnished, a metal table, 2 chairs, and a one-way mirror reflecting Smith's discomfort. The interrogation had been ongoing for hours, a relentless barrage of questions designed to break down Smith's carefully constructed facade. Riley led the charge, his voice calm but firm, his questions precise and probing. Miller remained silent, observing Smith's body language, searching for any telltale signs of deception. Smith continued to maintain his innocence, repeating his earlier claims that he had nothing to do with Olivia's disappearance. He denied knowing the Martin family well, insisting that he had only exchanged a few casual greetings with them over the years. He offered no explanation for the presence of his DNA on the fabric found in the Martins' backyard, suggesting that it might have been the result of accidental contamination. He appeared nervous and agitated, but he remained steadfast in his denial, clinging to his fabricated story. Riley pressed him harder, pointing out the inconsistencies in his statements, highlighting the damning DNA evidence that linked him to the crime scene. Smith grew increasingly defensive, his voice rising in pitch, his hands trembling. The pressure was mounting, the walls closing in around him. As the interrogation wore on, Smith's story began to unravel. Small cracks appeared in his carefully constructed facade, inconsistencies emerging in his timeline. He claimed to have been at home alone on the day Olivia disappeared, but he couldn't provide any specific details to support his alibi. When pressed about his sudden move out of the neighborhood shortly after Olivia's disappearance, he offered a vague explanation about a job opportunity in another state, but he couldn't recall the name of the company or the specific reasons for his departure. The detectives sensed that Smith was hiding something, that his carefully constructed lies were about to crumble. They continued to press him, relentlessly chipping away at his defenses, exposing the truth that he had tried so hard to conceal. The atmosphere in the interrogation room grew increasingly tense, the air thick with anticipation. Finally, after hours of relentless questioning, Robert Smith broke down. His voice cracked, his eyes filled with tears, and he confessed to abducting Olivia Martin. His account was vague and unsettling, a jumbled mess of fragmented memories and distorted justifications. He claimed that it was a spontaneous act, that he hadn't planned to abduct Olivia, that he had simply succumbed to a sudden impulse. He said he saw her playing in her backyard, and something inside him snapped. He approached her, coaxed her to come with him, and led her away from her home. He insisted that he didn't intend to harm her, that he only wanted to take her away for a little while. But his words rang hollow, his explanations unconvincing. The detectives knew that he was still withholding the full truth, that his confession was only a partial admission of guilt. But it was a start, a crucial breakthrough in the case. Smith's confession led investigators to a remote location outside Tulsa, a desolate area of wooded hills and overgrown fields. He claimed that he had taken Olivia to this location after abducting her, that he had left her there, and that he didn't know what had happened to her afterward. The detectives were skeptical of his claims, suspecting that he was deliberately misleading them, but they had no choice but to follow his lead. They organized a massive search operation, deploying hundreds of officers, cadaver dogs, and forensic experts to comb through the area. The search was painstaking and methodical, every inch of the terrain scrutinized for any sign of Olivia's remains. The detectives knew that time was of the essence, that the longer they waited, the less likely they were to find her. The search area was vast and unforgiving, the terrain rugged and difficult to navigate. The weather was hot and humid, adding to the physical strain on the search teams. They battled thick underbrush, steep hills, and swarms of insects, their determination fueled by the hope of finding Olivia and bringing closure to the Martin family. The emotional toll on the search teams was immense, the weight of the case pressing down on them with each passing hour. They were searching for the remains of a little girl, a victim of a heinous crime, and the thought of what she had endured haunted their every step. Despite the challenges, they pressed on, driven by a sense of duty and a commitment to finding the truth. The search for Olivia's remains had begun, a somber and arduous quest for closure in a case that had haunted Tulsa for nearly 2 decades. After days of relentless searching, a discovery was made that sent a wave of sorrow and finality through the search teams. Olivia's remains were found in a shallow grave, concealed beneath a layer of leaves and debris. The discovery was made by a team of cadaver dogs, their sensitive noses leading them to the concealed burial site. The scene was treated with the utmost care and respect, every detail meticulously documented and photographed. The remains were carefully exhumed and transported to the medical examiner's office for forensic analysis. The discovery brought a sense of closure to the Martin family, finally confirming their worst fears and ending the years of agonizing uncertainty. But it also deepened their grief, the reality of Olivia's death crashing down upon them with overwhelming force. The long-awaited answers had arrived, but they came at a devastating cost. The forensic analysis of Olivia's remains provided crucial information about the circumstances of her death, and helped to piece together the events that transpired after her abduction. The analysis confirmed the identity of the remains as those of Olivia Martin, using DNA comparison with her parents. The forensic team meticulously examined the skeletal remains, searching for any signs of trauma or injury. They analyzed the soil samples taken from the grave site, looking for clues about the burial site and the decomposition process. The analysis also provided an estimate of the time of death, helping to narrow down the timeline of events. Every piece of evidence was carefully collected and documented, contributing to the comprehensive understanding of Olivia's fate. The forensic analysis was a crucial step in the pursuit of justice, providing the evidence needed to hold Robert Smith accountable for his heinous crime. The forensic examination revealed that Olivia's cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. The analysis showed evidence of multiple skull fractures, indicating that she had been struck with a heavy object. The injuries were consistent with Smith's confession, in which he admitted to striking Olivia after she resisted his attempts to lead her further into the woods. The discovery of the cause of death added another layer of tragedy to the story, confirming the brutality of the crime and the suffering that Olivia had endured in her final moments. The details were difficult to bear, both for the investigators and for the Martin family, but they were essential to understanding the full extent of Smith's depravity and ensuring that justice was served. The revelation of Olivia's cause of death served as a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating consequences of violence. The town of Tulsa mourned Olivia's death, the community coming together to honor her memory and to offer support to the Martin family. A memorial service was held at a local church, attended by hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by Olivia's story. The service was a celebration of her life, a tribute to her innocence and her vibrant spirit. Friends and family shared memories of Olivia, recalling her infectious laughter, her bright smile, and her boundless energy. The service was a time for healing and remembrance, a chance for the community to come together and grieve the loss of a little girl who had been taken too soon. The town of Tulsa embraced the Martin family, offering them comfort and support as they navigated their grief and prepared for the difficult road ahead. The memorial service served as a powerful reminder of the importance of community, the strength of human connection, and the enduring power of love in the face of tragedy. 669 words. The prosecution team, led by District Attorney Sarah Johnson, meticulously began preparing for Robert Smith's trial. They understood the weight of the case, the intense public scrutiny, and the profound responsibility they had to secure justice for Olivia Martin and the Martin family. Johnson, a seasoned prosecutor with a reputation for her sharp intellect and unwavering determination, assembled a team of experienced attorneys and investigators. Their mission was clear: to build an airtight case against Smith, presenting irrefutable evidence of his guilt and ensuring that he was held accountable for his heinous crimes. The prosecution team knew that the defense would mount a vigorous challenge, but they were confident that the evidence was on their side and that they would prevail in court. Robert Smith's defense was spearheaded by Emily Carter, a high-profile attorney known for her aggressive tactics and her ability to win seemingly unwinnable cases. Carter, a formidable legal strategist, immediately challenged the validity of Smith's confession, arguing that it had been coerced under duress during the lengthy interrogation. She asserted that Smith was exhausted, confused, and vulnerable when he made the admission, and that the detectives had taken advantage of his weakened state to extract a false confession. Carter also questioned the reliability of the DNA evidence, arguing that it was circumstantial and that there was no direct evidence linking Smith to Olivia's abduction or murder. She hinted at the possibility of mistaken identity or contamination of the evidence, seeking to cast doubt on the prosecution's key piece of forensic proof. Her strategy was clear: to create reasonable doubt in the minds of the jurors, to convince them that there was a possibility, however slim, that Smith was innocent. The pre-trial hearings were a battleground where the prosecution and defense clashed over the admissibility of evidence, the validity of legal procedures, and the scope of the trial. Carter filed a series of motions to suppress Smith's confession and to exclude the DNA evidence, arguing that they were obtained in violation of his constitutional rights. Johnson countered, presenting compelling legal arguments and expert testimony to support the admissibility of the evidence. The judge carefully considered the arguments presented by both sides, weighing the legal precedents and the facts of the case. He ultimately ruled in favor of the prosecution, upholding the admissibility of Smith's confession and the DNA evidence, dealing a significant blow to the defense's strategy. The pre-trial hearings were a tense and contentious affair, setting the stage for a highly adversarial trial. As the trial approached, media coverage of the case reached a fever pitch. News outlets from around the world descended upon Tulsa, eager to capture every detail of the proceedings. The story of Olivia Martin's disappearance and the subsequent arrest of Robert Smith dominated the headlines, captivating the public's attention and fueling intense speculation. The media scrutinized every aspect of the case, from the evidence presented by the prosecution to the defense's legal strategies. Reporters interviewed neighbors, friends, and family members, seeking to paint a comprehensive picture of the people involved and the events that had transpired. The intense media scrutiny placed additional pressure on the prosecution and defense teams, as well as on the Martin family, who were forced to relive their trauma in the public eye. Despite their grief and the daunting prospect of a trial, Amy and David Martin were resolute in their determination to attend the proceedings and seek justice for Olivia. They knew that it would be an emotionally draining experience, forcing them to confront the man who had taken their daughter's life and to relive the horrors of the past 18 years. But they also knew that they had to be there, to represent Olivia, to ensure that her voice was heard in the courtroom. They found strength in their shared grief and their unwavering love for their daughter. They vowed to remain strong, to support each other, and to fight for justice, no matter how difficult the road ahead might be. They were determined to see Smith held accountable for his actions, to ensure that Olivia's memory was honored, and to prevent such a tragedy from ever happening again. Their presence in the courtroom would serve as a powerful symbol of their resilience, their unwavering love, and their unwavering pursuit of justice. 666 words. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the trial of Robert Smith began. The gallery was packed with members of the community, eager to witness the unfolding legal drama and to support the Martin family in their quest for justice. Amy and David Martin sat in the front row, their faces etched with a mixture of grief, anger, and determination. Robert Smith, clad in a dark suit, sat at the defense table, his expression unreadable. The atmosphere was thick with tension, the weight of the past 18 years hanging heavy in the air. The trial was about to begin, the culmination of years of searching, investigating, and preparing. The fate of Robert Smith, and the memory of Olivia Martin, rested in the hands of the jury. District Attorney Sarah Johnson rose to deliver the prosecution's opening statement, her voice resonating with conviction. She painted a vivid picture of Olivia Martin, a bright and innocent 6-year-old girl whose life was tragically cut short. She described the day of Olivia's disappearance, the frantic search, and the years of agonizing uncertainty that followed. She laid out the evidence that the prosecution would present, including Smith's confession, the DNA analysis linking him to the crime scene, and the forensic findings regarding Olivia's remains. She argued that the evidence overwhelmingly pointed to Smith's guilt, and that the jury would have no choice but to find him guilty of kidnapping and first-degree murder. Her opening statement was a powerful and emotional appeal to the jury, setting the stage for the prosecution's case. The prosecution's case hinged on Smith's confession, which they presented as a clear and unambiguous admission of guilt. They played a recording of the interrogation, allowing the jury to hear Smith's own words as he described abducting Olivia and leading her to the remote location where her remains were found. They emphasized the details of Smith's confession, highlighting the fact that he knew specific information about the crime that only the perpetrator could have known. They argued that Smith's confession was voluntary and that it was corroborated by the other evidence in the case, including the DNA analysis and the forensic findings. The prosecution presented a compelling argument that Smith's confession was the key to unlocking the truth about Olivia's disappearance. The DNA analysis served as another cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Expert witnesses testified about the meticulous process of collecting and analyzing the DNA samples, explaining how they were able to definitively link Smith to the fabric found in the Martins' backyard. They described the statistical probability of the DNA match, emphasizing that it was virtually impossible for the DNA to have come from anyone other than Smith. The prosecution argued that the DNA evidence was irrefutable proof that Smith had been at the scene of the crime, and that it directly contradicted his claims of innocence. The DNA evidence provided a scientific basis for the prosecution's case, bolstering their argument that Smith was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The forensic findings regarding Olivia's remains added a somber and emotional dimension to the prosecution's case. The medical examiner testified about the injuries that Olivia had sustained, describing the blunt force trauma to her head that had caused her death. The medical examiner explained how the injuries were consistent with Smith's confession, in which he admitted to striking Olivia. The prosecution argued that the forensic findings revealed the brutality of Smith's crime and the suffering that Olivia had endured in her final moments. The forensic evidence served as a stark reminder of the human cost of Smith's actions, adding weight to the prosecution's case. Amy Martin took the stand, her voice trembling as she recounted the events of the day Olivia disappeared. She described the last time she saw her daughter playing in the backyard, the brief phone call that took her inside, and the horrifying moment when she returned to find Olivia gone. She spoke of the years of anguish and uncertainty that followed, the constant hope that Olivia would be found alive, and the devastating pain of finally learning the truth about her fate. Her testimony was raw and emotional, bringing tears to the eyes of many in the courtroom. David Martin followed his wife to the stand, his voice filled with grief and anger. He described the impact of Olivia's disappearance on their family, the strain it had placed on their marriage, and the emptiness that had filled their lives. He spoke of his unwavering determination to find justice for Olivia and his hope that Smith would be held accountable for his actions. His testimony was powerful and moving, conveying the depth of his love for Olivia and the profound sense of loss that he had endured. The emotional testimony of Amy and David Martin humanized the case, reminding the jury of the real people whose lives had been shattered by Smith's actions. Expert witnesses were called to provide technical evidence and to explain complex scientific concepts to the jury. Forensic scientists testified about the DNA analysis, providing detailed explanations of the methodology and the statistical significance of the results. Medical examiners testified about the forensic findings, describing the injuries that Olivia had sustained and the cause of her death. The expert witnesses helped to clarify the technical aspects of the case, ensuring that the jury understood the scientific basis for the prosecution's arguments. Their testimony added credibility and weight to the prosecution's case, reinforcing the argument that Smith was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. 667 words. The defense team launched their case with a strategy aimed at discrediting the prosecution's evidence and sowing seeds of doubt in the jurors' minds. Emily Carter, Smith's lead attorney, began by attacking the validity of Smith's confession, arguing that it was coerced and unreliable. She called witnesses who testified about the intense pressure Smith was under during the interrogation, suggesting that he was exhausted and confused when he made the admission. She emphasized Smith's lack of legal experience and his vulnerability to the manipulative tactics of the detectives. The defense sought to portray Smith as a victim of the interrogation process, a man who was bullied and pressured into confessing to a crime he did not commit. The cross-examination of prosecution witnesses was a crucial part of the defense's strategy. Carter relentlessly questioned the detectives who had interrogated Smith, probing for inconsistencies in their accounts and highlighting any potential biases. She challenged their interrogation techniques, suggesting that they had used leading questions and psychological manipulation to elicit a confession from Smith. Carter also cross-examined the forensic scientists who had analyzed the DNA evidence, questioning the accuracy of their methods and the interpretation of their results. She sought to expose any potential errors or ambiguities in the scientific evidence, arguing that it was not as conclusive as the prosecution claimed. The defense's cross-examination was designed to undermine the credibility of the prosecution's witnesses and to create doubt about the reliability of their evidence. The moment Robert Smith took the stand was a pivotal point in the trial. He appeared nervous and subdued, his eyes darting around the courtroom as he swore to tell the truth. He began by denying any involvement in Olivia's disappearance, repeating his earlier claims that he barely knew the Martin family and that he had nothing to do with her abduction or murder. He claimed that he had been at home alone on the day Olivia disappeared, but he could not provide any specific details to support his alibi. He offered a vague explanation for the presence of his DNA on the fabric found in the Martins' backyard, suggesting that it might have been the result of accidental contamination or a misunderstanding. He portrayed himself as a victim of circumstance, a man wrongly accused of a crime he did not commit. Smith's demeanor on the stand was carefully calculated. He spoke softly and deliberately, avoiding eye contact with the jurors. He appeared contrite and remorseful, expressing sympathy for the Martin family and acknowledging the pain they had endured. He denied any intention of harming Olivia, claiming that he had simply been a friendly neighbor who had occasionally seen her playing in her backyard. He sought to present himself as a harmless and unassuming man, incapable of such a heinous crime. But his words rang hollow, his explanations unconvincing. The jurors watched him intently, trying to discern whether he was telling the truth or simply trying to deceive them. Whether the jury believed Smith remained to be seen. His carefully constructed facade was convincing to some, but others saw through his deception. His nervous demeanor and evasive answers raised suspicions, and his inability to provide a credible alibi undermined his claims of innocence. The jurors were tasked with weighing Smith's testimony against the other evidence in the case, considering the credibility of his statements and the consistency of his account. Their decision would determine Smith's fate and would bring closure to the long and painful saga of Olivia Martin's disappearance. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the jury listened intently to Smith's testimony, knowing that their verdict would have a profound impact on the lives of everyone involved. The truth, it seemed, hung precariously in the balance. 669 words. The prosecution wasted no time in launching a relentless cross-examination of Robert Smith, their goal to dismantle his carefully crafted persona and expose the lies beneath. District Attorney Johnson approached him with a calm but steely demeanor, her voice sharp and precise as she began her line of questioning. She immediately focused on the inconsistencies in his testimony, highlighting the contradictions between his statements on the stand and his previous accounts to the police. She pressed him about his alibi, demanding specific details about his activities on the day Olivia disappeared, details he couldn't provide. Johnson challenged Smith's claim that he barely knew the Martin family, presenting photographs showing him at neighborhood gatherings, his presence seemingly innocuous at the time, but now taking on a sinister significance. She questioned him about his sudden move out of the neighborhood shortly after Olivia's disappearance, demanding a more convincing explanation than the vague story about a job opportunity. She hammered him with questions about the DNA evidence, forcing him to explain how his genetic material could have ended up on the fabric found in the Martins' backyard if he had never been near the scene of the crime. Smith's answers became increasingly evasive and contradictory, his carefully constructed facade beginning to crumble under the intense pressure. As the cross-examination wore on, Smith's story unraveled further. Johnson presented evidence that Smith had been seen watching Olivia play in her backyard on several occasions, his gaze lingering a little too long. She produced witnesses who testified that Smith had asked about the Martin family's schedule, inquiring about when they would be home and when Olivia would be alone. These seemingly insignificant details, pieced together over time, painted a disturbing picture of a man who had been carefully observing Olivia, perhaps even planning her abduction. Smith vehemently denied these allegations, but his denials lacked conviction, his voice trembling with fear and desperation. Johnson then turned to Smith's confession, dissecting it piece by piece, exposing the inconsistencies and ambiguities in his account. She challenged his claim that the abduction was a spontaneous act, pointing out the evidence that suggested he had been planning the crime for some time. She questioned his assertion that he didn't intend to harm Olivia, highlighting the forensic evidence that showed she had been struck with a heavy object. She accused him of minimizing his role in Olivia's death, of attempting to portray himself as a victim of circumstance rather than a cold-blooded killer. Smith's attempts to defend himself grew increasingly desperate, his words failing to mask the growing evidence of his guilt. By the end of the cross-examination, Smith's credibility had been completely shattered. His lies had been exposed, his inconsistencies highlighted, and his attempts to deceive the jury had been laid bare. He sat slumped in his chair, his face pale and drawn, his eyes filled with despair. The prosecution had successfully dismantled his carefully constructed persona, revealing the darkness that lurked beneath the surface. The damage was done, and it seemed unlikely that he could recover from the devastating blow. With the evidence presented and the witnesses examined, the trial moved to its final stage, closing arguments. District Attorney Johnson delivered a powerful and emotional summation, weaving together the evidence and testimony to paint a compelling picture of Smith's guilt. She reminded the jury of Olivia Martin, the innocent little girl whose life had been tragically cut short. She recounted the events of the day she disappeared, the frantic search, and the years of agonizing uncertainty that followed. She emphasized the strength of the prosecution's case, highlighting Smith's confession, the DNA evidence, and the forensic findings. She urged the jury to hold Smith accountable for his heinous crimes and to bring justice to Olivia and the Martin family. Her closing argument was a passionate plea for justice, a final and compelling appeal to the jury's sense of right and wrong. Defense Attorney Carter delivered a contrasting closing argument, attempting to salvage what remained of Smith's defense, She rehashed her earlier arguments, attacking the validity of Smith's confession and questioning the reliability of the DNA evidence. She appealed to the jury's sense of doubt, urging them to consider the possibility that Smith was innocent and that the prosecution had not proven his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Her closing argument was a desperate attempt to create confusion and uncertainty, to sow seeds of doubt in the jurors' minds. But after the devastating cross-examination of Smith, it seemed unlikely that her words would have much impact. The fate of Robert Smith now rested in the hands of the jury, who would soon begin their deliberations. 669 words. The jury retired to the deliberation room, the weight of their responsibility palpable as they filed out of the courtroom. The door closed behind them, sealing them off from the outside world, their focus now solely on the evidence and arguments presented during the trial. The courtroom fell silent, the tension thick as everyone awaited the jury's verdict. Amy and David Martin sat huddled together, their hands clasped tightly, their faces etched with anxiety. Robert Smith remained at the defense table, his gaze fixed on the floor, his fate hanging precariously in the balance. The hours that followed would be agonizing, a test of patience and endurance as the jury wrestled with the complex evidence and the weighty decision before them. The jury deliberations began with a review of the evidence, a meticulous examination of the testimony, the exhibits, and the legal instructions provided by the judge. They replayed the recording of Smith's confession, scrutinizing his words and his demeanor, searching for any clues that might reveal his true intentions. They pored over the DNA analysis reports, debating the statistical significance of the match and considering the possibility of contamination. They reviewed the forensic findings, examining the photographs of Olivia's remains and discussing the cause of her death. The jurors approached their task with diligence and seriousness, understanding that their decision would have a profound impact on the lives of everyone involved. As the hours passed, the deliberations grew more intense, the jurors grappling with conflicting opinions and struggling to reach a unanimous verdict. Some jurors were convinced of Smith's guilt from the start, swayed by his confession and the DNA evidence. Others were more hesitant, troubled by the lack of direct evidence and the possibility that Smith had been coerced into confessing. The jurors debated the credibility of the witnesses, the reliability of the evidence, and the strength of the prosecution's case. They challenged each other's assumptions, scrutinized each other's reasoning, and wrestled with the legal concepts of reasonable doubt and presumption of innocence. The length of the jury deliberations was a source of anxiety for everyone involved in the case. As the hours stretched into days, the tension in the courtroom grew unbearable. The Martin family waited anxiously, their hopes rising and falling with each passing hour. Robert Smith remained in his cell, consumed by fear and uncertainty. The lawyers on both sides paced the hallways, wondering what the jury was thinking and how the deliberations were progressing. The length of the deliberations suggested that the jury was struggling to reach a unanimous verdict, that there were deep divisions within the group. The longer they deliberated, the greater the suspense became, the more uncertain the outcome seemed. After days of intense deliberations, the jury finally reached a verdict. A message was sent to the judge, informing him that they had reached a decision. The news spread quickly through the courthouse, sending a ripple of anticipation through the waiting crowd. The courtroom was quickly filled, everyone eager to witness the final act of the legal drama. Amy and David Martin took their seats in the front row, their faces pale but resolute. Robert Smith was brought into the courtroom, his expression unreadable. The judge entered the courtroom, his face solemn and grave. The atmosphere was electric, the tension palpable as everyone awaited the announcement of the verdict. The moment of truth had arrived, the culmination of years of searching, investigating, and preparing. The fate of Robert Smith, and the memory of Olivia Martin, was about to be revealed. The jury filed into the courtroom, their faces somber and serious. The foreperson, a middle-aged woman with a steady gaze, stood to announce the verdict. Her voice was clear and firm as she spoke the words that everyone had been waiting to hear. The courtroom held its breath, the silence broken only by the foreperson's voice as she revealed the jury's decision, a decision that would forever alter the lives of those involved. The verdict was about to be announced, the final chapter in the long and tragic story of Olivia Martin. 670 words. We, the jury, in the case of the state of Oklahoma versus Robert Smith, find the defendant guilty of kidnapping in the first degree. A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. Amy Martin sobbed quietly, David's arm around her, his face a mask of grim satisfaction. Robert Smith remained motionless, his eyes fixed on the foreperson, seemingly detached from the reality of the moment. The foreperson continued, her voice unwavering. We further find the defendant guilty of murder in the first degree. A wave of emotion surged through the room, a mixture of relief, anger, and sorrow. Justice, after 18 long years, had finally been served. The reaction to the guilty verdict was immediate and visceral. Amy Martin broke down completely, weeping uncontrollably as the weight of her grief and the relief of finally achieving justice overwhelmed her. David Martin, his face etched with years of pain, held his wife tightly, offering silent comfort and support. A wave of applause erupted from the gallery, a spontaneous outpouring of emotion from the community that had been so deeply affected by Olivia's disappearance. The applause was quickly silenced by the judge, who reminded everyone that the proceedings were not yet over. Robert Smith remained impassive as the verdict was read, showing no visible reaction to the pronouncement of his guilt. He was led away by court officers, his face expressionless, his fate sealed. His attorneys, visibly shaken by the verdict, huddled together, discussing their options for appeal. The prosecution team, on the other hand, exchanged smiles of satisfaction, knowing that they had successfully brought a killer to justice. District Attorney Johnson addressed the media outside the courthouse, expressing her gratitude to the jury for their careful consideration of the evidence, and her hope that the verdict would bring some measure of closure to the Martin family. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for the following week, giving the Martin family an opportunity to address the court and to speak directly to Robert Smith. They prepared their statements carefully, crafting words that would express the depth of their pain, their anger, and their unwavering belief in justice. They wanted Smith to understand the devastation he had caused, the lives he had shattered, and the enduring impact of his crime. They wanted him to know that Olivia would never be forgotten and that her memory would continue to inspire them to fight for justice and to protect other children from harm. At the sentencing hearing, the courtroom was once again packed with members of the community, eager to witness the final chapter of the legal proceedings. Amy Martin spoke first, her voice trembling but resolute. She described the joy that Olivia had brought into their lives, the hopes and dreams they had had for her future, and the unbearable pain of losing her. She spoke of the years of uncertainty and anguish, the constant fear that Olivia was suffering, and the profound emptiness that had filled their lives since her disappearance. She looked directly at Robert Smith and said, "You took away our daughter, our joy, our future. You will never be forgiven for what you have done." David Martin followed his wife, his voice filled with anger and sorrow. He described the impact of Olivia's disappearance on their marriage, the strain it had placed on their relationship, and the years of therapy and counseling they had undergone. He spoke of his unwavering determination to find justice for Olivia and his satisfaction that Smith had finally been brought to justice. He looked at Smith and said, "You are a monster, a predator who preyed on an innocent child. You deserve to spend the rest of your life in prison, where you can never harm another person." Robert Smith declined to make a statement, remaining silent and impassive as the judge prepared to pronounce his sentence. Judge Thompson addressed Smith, her voice stern and unwavering. She spoke of the gravity of his crimes, the senselessness of his violence, and the profound impact he had had on the Martin family and the community. She emphasized the importance of holding him accountable for his actions and of sending a message that such crimes would not be tolerated. She then pronounced the sentence. "Robert Smith, you are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole." Judge Thompson added, "This sentence reflects the heinous nature of your crimes and the irreparable harm you have inflicted. May it bring some measure of peace to the Martin family, though I know that no sentence can ever truly compensate them for their loss. This court hopes it may offer assurance to the community that justice is served, regardless of how long it may take. This case stands as a testament to the dedication of law enforcement and the enduring pursuit of truth. With that, the sentencing hearing concluded, and Robert Smith was led away to begin his life sentence, a prisoner of his own dark deeds. 664 words. The aftermath of the trial rippled through Tulsa, leaving an indelible mark on the community. While the guilty verdict brought a sense of closure and relief, it also reopened old wounds, reminding everyone of the tragic loss of Olivia Martin and the years of pain and uncertainty that had followed her disappearance. The case became a symbol of both the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of evil, a reminder that even in the most peaceful communities, darkness can lurk beneath the surface. The trial forced the town to confront its past, to grapple with the lingering questions and the unanswered mysteries that still surrounded Olivia's fate. It was a time of reflection, remembrance, and renewed commitment to protecting children and preventing such tragedies from happening again. Amy and David Martin faced the daunting task of rebuilding their lives after the trial, of finding a way to heal from their trauma and to honor Olivia's memory. They established the Olivia Martin Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting families of missing children and to promoting awareness about child safety. The foundation provided resources for families searching for their loved ones, offering financial assistance, emotional support, and guidance through the complex legal and investigative processes. They organized community events, raising awareness about the dangers of child abduction and teaching parents how to protect their children. The foundation became Amy and David's way of channeling their grief into positive action, of turning their personal tragedy into a force for good. Detective John Riley, nearing the end of his career, felt a profound sense of satisfaction in solving the case before his retirement. He had carried the weight of Olivia's disappearance on his shoulders for nearly 2 decades, haunted by the unanswered questions and the pain of the Martin family. He had made a promise to Amy Martin that he would not rest until he found the truth about Olivia, and he had finally fulfilled that promise. The guilty verdict brought him a sense of closure, a feeling that he had finally brought justice to Olivia and the Martin family. He retired from the police force with a sense of accomplishment, knowing that he had made a difference in the lives of others and that he had left the community a safer place. Olivia's case left a lasting legacy, highlighting the importance of never giving up hope and the power of perseverance in solving cold cases. The investigation into her disappearance had been plagued by setbacks, false leads, and dwindling hope, but Detective Riley's unwavering commitment had ultimately led to a breakthrough. The case served as an inspiration to other investigators, demonstrating that even the most challenging cold cases can be solved with dedication, innovation, and the application of new technologies. It also highlighted the importance of community involvement in solving crimes, demonstrating the power of collective action in bringing justice to victims and their families. Olivia's case became a symbol of the enduring pursuit of truth and the unwavering belief in the possibility of justice, even after years of uncertainty and despair. The successful resolution of Olivia's case prompted a renewed focus on cold case investigations across the country. Law enforcement agencies began allocating more resources to cold case units, recognizing the potential for solving long unsolved crimes through the application of new technologies and investigative techniques. DNA analysis became an increasingly important tool in cold case investigations, allowing investigators to identify suspects and to link them to crime scenes even years after the crime had occurred. The success of the Olivia Martin case served as a catalyst for increased funding and support for cold case investigations, leading to the resolution of numerous other long unsolved crimes. The case became a model for other investigations, demonstrating the importance of perseverance, innovation, and collaboration in bringing closure to victims and their families. 667 words. Returning to Olivia's memorial. Sight is a somber experience, a place where grief and remembrance intertwine. Located in a quiet corner of a local park, the memorial is a simple yet poignant tribute to a life cut short. A small stone bench sits beneath a weeping willow tree, its branches gently swaying in the breeze. A plaque on the bench bears Olivia's name and a brief inscription: "Forever in our hearts." Around the base of the tree, colorful flowers bloom, planted by family members, friends, and members of the community who wish to honor her memory. Small toys, stuffed animals, and handwritten notes are scattered among the flowers, tangible expressions of love and loss. The memorial site is a place for quiet reflection, a sanctuary for those who seek solace and a connection to Olivia's spirit. It is a place where tears are shed, memories are shared, and hope is rekindled. Despite the closure brought by Smith's conviction, unanswered questions linger, casting a shadow over the resolution of Olivia's case. Smith's true motive for abducting Olivia remains shrouded in mystery, his confession offering only a vague and unsettling account of the events. The exact circumstances of Olivia's death are also unclear, leaving unanswered questions about the final moments of her life. While the forensic evidence provided valuable information, it could not fully reconstruct the events that transpired after her abduction. The absence of a clear motive and a detailed account of Olivia's death leaves a void in the narrative, a reminder that some truths may never be fully known. The unanswered questions serve as a source of frustration and lingering pain for the Martin family and the community, a reminder that even in the face of justice, some wounds may never fully heal. Despite the darkness that surrounded Olivia's case, a message of hope and resilience emerges, emphasizing the importance of remembering her and honoring her memory by supporting efforts to protect children and solve cold cases. Olivia's story serves as a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of cherishing every moment. It inspires people to be vigilant, to protect vulnerable children, and to speak out against violence and injustice. Her memory motivates,